All right. Hi, everybody. Can you hear me? My name is Gretchen. I am an alcoholic, and forgive me, I'm getting over a little bit of a cold. So if I sneeze or cough, apologies ahead of time. My sobriety date is August 16, 2001. I have a home group, which is First Things First in Johnson City, Tennessee. We meet Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. and we'd love to have people stop by. I have a sponsor, Liz V, who lives in Burgaw, North Carolina, and she is also sponsored by a woman named Linda B, who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. So Liz, when Liz first sponsored me, she had a different sponsor, and her name was Sandy, and Sandy was sponsored by Peggy M, who is no longer with us, and Sandy passed away a couple of years ago. So I've always had a sponsor who's had a sponsor. Um, the thing for me about being an alcoholic is that the promises have certainly come true. And I can say that my life now is beyond my wildest dreams. However, life does come on life's terms, and there are times when I'm sitting in the truth that the only place that I find solace is in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And whenever I'm disquieted, I go to a meeting, and I always walk out feeling better. So I was born in Knoxville. I am a Tennessean, and let's see, I'm an only child, and I have grandparents or I did in East Kentucky, and I had grandparents in Knoxville. One set was one of my grandfathers was a coal miner, and one of my grandfathers was a Baptist minister in a very well-known church in Knoxville. And so I grew up on one hand having a big family in East Kentucky where we played and had a great time, and everything was just sort of less formal. And then I would go to another house where things were very formal. I knew how to set a table by the time I was 5, and I had these two different kinds of lessons I learned. And my mom and dad were students at UT, and at that time, and one of the things that I learned early on was that my mom had good days and bad days, and that it was sometimes a good idea to hide and to not be present when the bad days were going on. The thing I later found out was that my mom has manic depression, and she was untreated for many years. And I grew up walking on glass. So I started school early, and one of the first things I remember about the school that I went to was that I was humiliated publicly because I wrote on some paper with a pencil, and instead of using an eraser, I licked my finger and wiped out the graphite to write a different number in. And the teacher came by and held it up and said, "We don't do this. This is the wrong way to do things." And I am 58 years old, and I still remember that feeling, and that further encouraged me to hide and to keep to myself the things that I did. In the 70s in Knoxville, around Cumberland Avenue, which is where UT is, it was, I remember my parents taking me to Vietnam War demonstrations, and there were lots of the parties and hippies and loud music. The house that I lived in, there was a rock band that lived next door that drove a hearse, and I was not allowed to walk in their yard because my mom was concerned about needles in the grass. Um, I just remember this tremendous sense of freedom. Um, there were some times that I didn't know were really off, that were in fact augurs of things to come. The first thing was that I remember one time being stuck in traffic, and my mom got tired of the traffic, and so she just whipped the 55 Chevy onto the sidewalk, and people were just hopping to the left and right, and we just drove on out of the traffic. And the second thing also had to do with cars, and we were on the interstate, and the steering wheel came off in her hands, and she just looked at me and started laughing and just popped it back in the car. So there were things that I can recall from that time that I don't know, that other people didn't experience. So I didn't really tell people about things. And certainly I learned that in my family, we don't talk about things that go on in the house to outside people. My grandmother in East Kentucky, who I was extremely close to, had two brothers who were alcoholics, one of which my Uncle Billy, he was in World War II. And his job was to clean out Dresden after the bombing. And he came back a raging alcoholic. He would pour turpentine through bread and drink it. And back in those days, they didn't have places where you could go to dry out. So he would go to jail and lock himself in. It was like Otis on Andy Griffith. And Billy died when I was really young. My other great uncle, my grandmother's other brother Joe died maybe when I was in my 40s, and he had a longer drinking career, but by the time he died, he had lost everything. And his daughter kept his ashes in a tackle box until she decided it's time to get rid of them. So, a lot of bridges were burned with their alcoholism. And my grandmother told me she remembers her father coming and getting her one time because Billy was passed out in a snowbank, and they had to try and wake him and drag him inside so he didn't freeze to death. So I heard all of these stories, but these were men and these were all people, and they had absolutely nothing to do with who I was. Because of my dysfunction at home, I really wanted to fit in at school. And when we moved to Nashville, it was a little different than Knoxville. I was 11 years old, and some people may remember this, some people may not. I was bused to North Nashville, which is a very scary area. And the friends that I made were the drinkers and the druggies and the tough kids. And I liked that because I felt safe. And the first time I got drunk, I was 11. And I created a pattern of binge drinking. Whenever my friends could get alcohol, I would drink and I would get drunk. And that didn't happen that much. It was maybe 3 or 4 or 5 months apart. But this was the late 70s and the early 80s, and I was focused on doing other things rather than schoolwork. I did excel at school. However, my main interest was drugs and alcohol and music. I left home when I was 17, and I got a job in a very nice restaurant, and I discovered that if you work in restaurants, then you party and drink in restaurants and clubs after hours. And so I did a lot of that. I was married when I was 19, and I married a recording engineer, and we drank a lot and saw a lot of shows. And essentially at that point, it became more important to drink than to have relationships and to be a part of things. I would go to things and do things and be present physically, but my focus was alcohol. And I never felt comfortable unless I had a drink. And that was a lot of fun. When I was drunk. When I was not drunk, I was quiet and introverted, and I like to read and stay away from people. So it's almost as if I learned how to have friends and be a part of things when I had alcohol in me. When that first drink hit, I could fly, and I just loved that. It was at that point that I started being a daily drinker, and I would drink until I fell asleep at night, and that went on for a number of years. But it was an extraordinary thing for me to not have a drink at night, and typically it was because I was hungover and I was too sick to drink, or I had the flu. Although I learned that I could microwave red wine and spices and drink while I was sick and call it a toddy. I would do that with rum too. I went back to school and I studied interior design, but as alcohol was my priority, the pattern of doing well at school but not really applying myself continued. So there were things that there are many things I could have done better. I was divorced at 27. I'm sure my lifestyle had something to do with it. I went to Eastern Europe for the summer and drank my way through Europe. And on the way back, I stopped in New York and ended up with a job as a decorative painter, and never went back to Nashville. Um, my finest drinking hours were in New York because there were cabs and subways and there were bars on every street corner, and I could just drink the way I wanted to and not be concerned about what I did and who I called and how I acted. And that's where I started serious blackouts. I did not lose any jobs because of alcohol at that point. But what did happen to me is I lost my creative energy, and what I used to love didn't matter anymore because all I wanted to do was drink. And I got married a second time. I met somebody on a blind date and went to the Temple Bar, and I told him, never drink a martini larger than your head. And with that, we married maybe 6 months later. And I always felt guilty about that. And I felt like I had to make it work. So I stayed there for 17 years, and it wasn't good. He had a temper like my mother had a temper. We drank, we fought, we moved, we had a geographic location. I moved to York, Pennsylvania, got sober in York, Pennsylvania, but my drinking had reached a point where I was falling. I fell off their back porch and knocked myself out on a brick patio and cracked some bones, occipital bones, and had to go to the hospital. I was by myself, so the next day I went to the hospital, and from then on, the doctors would ask me if I was in a safe environment. But what I really wanted to say was, well, I'm the real danger. It's nobody else. I'm the alcoholic. Through all this time, with all the friends and all the fun and all of the charming things about alcohol, it was starting to not be fun. And I was drinking in the morning. There would be those thoughts like, oh, I should just have a drink. And then I'd be, well, it's only 11. Well, people have alcohol at lunch, so I would have a drink. Or I don't know how many people know this secret of the box wines, but I would have several box wines hidden around the house. And the thing is nobody can see how much you were drinking. So, I could keep one glass of wine going all day long. That was really a half a box. And I would have vodka in the freezer and all of the things we do. And, I was sloppy. I would drink until I slide against a wall and fall down. And fortunately, my finest hour was before social media. So there aren't a lot of films, texts, all of these things. I was from the drink and dial era. And with that, all we had was star 69. And I'm sure there were people who thought, oh no, when they saw my phone number come up. Um, Throughout the progression of my alcoholism, I had several moments of clarity where, it felt as if, after a night of long drinking, I would wake up and there would be just that what do I want to say? Just that liminal space where I could say, you're an alcoholic. And I could say, I know I'm an alcoholic. And then I would drink again, and I never took it any further. What happened was that, well, a couple of things. York, Pennsylvania is not a large city, so there's not a lot of public transportation. So I was driving, and I was at the point where, um, it was always that thing, wake up, I'm not going to drink today, but by the time work was over, I'm driving to the liquor store, or, there was never any doubt in my mind when I woke up in the morning that I wasn't going to drink. But by 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm thinking, well, what am I going to drink today? I think if I have wine, I'll be okay. And it was always that I'll be okay. All of the secrets and the things and the terrible things that happen to us who drink. Um, all of that I could tap down with just what I thought was one tiny glass of wine that never emptied. That's like a magic well. But so I would do this thing where I would buy I really liked gin, so I would buy my Bombay Sapphire gin, and I would pour my martinis out, and I would set a limit. I'm only going to have 4 tonight. And I would pour them out, and I would get rid of all the alcohol. And when the fourth one was done, as some of us do, would say that wasn't enough. And I would get in my car and go get more. And I went to get more one night, and I walked into the liquor store and got whatever it was I was getting. And the man who was checking me out looked at his other guy, and he said, "Is she a VIP?" And I got very happy, and I thought, "Why, yes, I am a VIP. I'm so glad you recognized that." And when I left, I realized they had a sign out front that VIP was visibly intoxicated person. And that's not anything I ever wanted to be. I've always just wanted to be okay and to have love in my life. So what got me sober was I had done one of those things where I had consumed all the alcohol in the house and gone out and gotten more and drank it. And when I woke up the next day, I realized that when I was walking by work, there was a newspaper stand where, you had the day's newspapers in it. And the headline was that there had been a hit and run in the area. Now, it wasn't me, but it could have been. And that scared me. So I decided to go to an AA meeting. Meanwhile, I've been in therapy for about 8 months for my drinking, and I was lying to my therapist about how much I was drinking, which she probably knew, but she was going along with me. So I went to my first AA meeting. I was terrified to go, so I ransacked the house, and I found a bottle shoved way back in a cabinet of like one of those airplane bottles of Godiva white chocolate liqueur, and I drank it, and it was terrible. But it got me to my meeting, and I came home and I didn't drink any more that night. But the next day, I went to the meeting. I'm 35 years old. I never lost a job. Um, I'm a fall down blackout drunk with relationships on the skids, miserable, hating myself, feeling terrible, tons of stuff, tons of dark stuff shoved down in my system. And I walk into this meeting and I know I need to stop drinking. And, I'd had this hang up about going to meetings in church basements. So the only meeting I would go to was in a hospital in York, Pennsylvania. And it was called Keep It Green. And it was in the hospital cafeteria. And I walked in and there were tons of people laughing and having a good time. And it smelled like French fries. And there was this guy, and he had on a Hawaiian shirt, and he's saying hi to everybody. And I thought, oh, I don't like him. He's too happy. And so I found a tree to sit behind. It was like a fake rubber tree plant in the back of the room. And I went back there and hid. And what I found out later was that plant, that plant was a known cop out for beginners. And so people would come and talk to me. And the miracle was I left the meeting and I didn't drink. And that was day 2. And on day 3, I went back and I didn't sit at the plant. I sat at a table and I tried to listen, and I had a lot of trouble listening. And somebody gave me a big book, and, things would go in one ear and go out the other. And for a year, all I could do was read the stories. When people, talk about the stories and maybe not having them in the big book, I can say the stories kept me sober the first year because I could not comprehend the writing beyond the stories. And I got a sponsor, and we worked the steps. We went through it. She had had a cerebral hemorrhage about 10 years before, and she had a little divot in her head. And what I found out really quickly was that she was a miracle to be alive, but she had no short-term memory. And that is really handy on a 4th step because, I could snow her on a lot of things and she wouldn't remember it. And at some point, it became clear to me that I was staying sick and I needed to look for another sponsor. And there was a woman that I really liked. I thought she was 10 feet tall and had a golden aura around her, and that she was the most kind, loving, sober person I had ever seen. And I was terrified, but I asked her to sponsor me. And she said, well, what you do is you have to tell your other sponsor that you want to change, and I will not sponsor you until you talk to your next sponsor. And it was the scariest thing, and I did it, and we started the work again. And for me, the first 3 steps were easy and terrible at the same time, because I have a lot of God hangups from growing up with a Baptist minister for a grandfather. Because in my family, we cleaned up really well for church, and when we went home, that went away, and that wasn't practiced. So I always felt like I was hiding something and maybe not quite worthy of a loving God. And I work on that to this day. Occasionally I seek outside help for things that I have going on. And at one point I was seeking outside help to work through my God issues, because it's really important to me to have that sound foundation. My sponsor once said to me, you better get a God, and I'm not it. I'm a human being. And as a human being, ultimately, I will let you down. And that made a lot of sense to me. So I do have a higher power now. My husband now, who is not the New York, Baltimore husband, York, Pennsylvania husband. This is my 3rd, and I met in the program. And we met over talks about higher powers. And I am really grateful for that. With my sponsor, Liz, with her sponsorship family, she was taught that on time is 15 minutes early. I know if I have some home group members on this site, I can feel their eyebrows raising, because on time for me is often 5 to 3 of. let's see, she taught me to reach out, to extend the hand of AA. And one of the things that she has said to me repeatedly is that you may be the only example of a big book that someone ever sees. She's taught me to treat people with loving kindness and to also have forced cheerfulness. And service work was very important. I've been a greeter, a treasurer. I've been a GSR. I've been a DCM. Currently, I am not doing anything, but that will change, because I know there's always room for service in AA. I do sponsor people. When I did my fourth step, what I found, my first fourth step, one of the practices that I have is when things come up and they bother me, I typically do a fourth step, and I often find that the root of the problem is not what I think it is. And if I have a major decision to make, I don't do that without my sponsor. And sometimes she talks to her sponsor before, any decisions are made, because, my mind is not, my mind is the mind of an alcoholic to this day. And I have a lot of fun laughing about it. But the fact is, major decisions are not my strong point. One of the things that four steps have taught me is that not doing them is far worse than doing them, if anyone is new and is working on that. The dark things that come out when we bring them to light, they disappear. And it's a joy, it's an exercise in freedom. You find someone you trust. I found someone that I trusted with my life, and it's been the best thing that ever happened to me, because I've learned about trusting people in a way that I never knew. I do 10 steps, 11 steps, and of course I try to carry the message regularly. I had the fortune a few years ago of having someone come into the office where I work, who needed recovery, and we started coming to my home group together. And so I have someone in recovery who's literally 15 steps down the hallway, and it makes my work much better, because we have a meeting anytime we want. Whenever there are two people are present, we can have a meeting. A few years ago, maybe 15 years ago, the group of ladies that I'm a part of, that Liz sponsors, we try to get together on a regular basis, and we took a camping trip and invited Peggy M to come and talk to us about the traditions in relationships. And it was really fascinating to me, really opened to my eyes to everything that AA can be, and how we can live our lives on these principles and receive bounties that were closed off to us when we were alcoholics. I'm checking the time. So I've got, is it 3 more hours that I have? Yeah, I see somebody laughing. Yeah, once I get started, I can really talk. But I want to speak to what's going on in my life now. My parents moved to Johnson City a couple of years ago, and my father has had Alzheimer's, and so for the past 2 years, I had the privilege of being able to see him every day, and on weekends drive him places and go places and do things. And as he lost himself to this terrible disease, we would sometimes, our day would be, we would go sit in Target, and I would get him a cookie and a coffee, and he would watch people. And I got to do that. And I didn't realize it at the time, but my mother's mental illness was kicking, ratcheting up. She almost died 5 years ago of a lithium overdose and was in at Vanderbilt Hospital with emergency hemodialysis, which is they do that through your neck. And I remember being in the intensive care and watching this and just thinking, and my father was and my husband were going over her health records and all of the times that she had been institutionalized or this drug and that drug, and none of it was ever talked about in my family. I mean, I was a little snoop, so I knew some things, but to have this outpouring of someone's struggles, I didn't really grasp what that would mean now. And what it meant was as she got sicker now, things started to flip. And 6 weeks ago, she was in the hospital for a kidney blood pressure issue, and we had to have my father, who was on hospice, put in a hospital bed at home. And when she came out of the hospital, because of the drugs she'd been given, she was psychotic, and she kicked me out of the house and told me she was calling the police. And my father died 5 days later. And I didn't get to see him again. And the crazy thing is that she hasn't told anybody that he's dead. I know it's very Faulknerian, and it's the way my family works, but I got 4 cards, and they were all from members of AA. And that has carried me through this craziness. Of course, I increase my meetings. And when I go to meetings, it's like I'm a beginner again. I sit in that meeting and I have peace, and all of the things that are crazy in my life calm down and I can breathe. And I think about it, and I know like I'm sitting in a truth right now that's almost I don't want to say unbearable, because it's bearable. I'm here and I'm bearing it, and my life is good and I have good things and bad things, but I'm sitting in this truth right now that I was never fully able to grasp as a kid and in early recovery. And what AA has done is it has allowed me to hold this truth and to grow from it and to lean into my higher power in ways that I would have never been able to do if it weren't for the guy in the Hawaiian shirt, or Peggy Martin, or Sandy Shuck, or Liz, or this person and that person. I was talking to Liz's sponsor last night, Jack, and I was just telling him about this experience of like, I'm going into a meeting and just feeling this stuff that I haven't felt in years. And he goes, yeah, it's just like you're a beginner again. And I said, it really is. And it's a great thing because, and we always say, when your butt falls off, put it in a wheelbarrow and roll it to a meeting. But there's some truth in that, because that's my solace, that's my safe place. And so when I think about all of the times that with the lessons I learned from Liz about showing up and greeting people and talking to that person who nobody's talking to, it came back tenfold to me. And I may have been sour about doing it, but we do the action, we don't keep the action in your head. We do the action, and, we get to stay sober and our life gets to get better. Yeah, I don't know how it's going to end yet. I don't know how this tale will end yet with my mom. It's certainly not over. And when I pray about it, People say, well, when you pray and you have a question, the answer can be yes, no, or maybe. Right now, when I pray, my answer is wait, be still. And so I'm being still. I've increased my meetings. I found a great Friday night meeting, and then I have a women's group meeting that I go to. And so I'm just in a place of stillness and sitting in truth. And it's my husband had said one time, when he was yeah, he was sober, he'd been sober a while, and somebody had suggested to him that he say the prayer, or he had prayed, God, show me the hidden things. And I thought, well, that sounds like a good prayer. And so I did it about 2 or 3 months ago, and things got a little wild, and a lot of hidden things came out that I wasn't uh, necessarily wanting to see, but I learned so much. So with that, it's 8:47, so I've talked a long time, so I think I'm done for right now. But I like this meeting, and when when I find out more things, I'll check back in and let you guys know how the situation turns out. But I want to thank Stephen for letting me speak.